In the autumn of 936, the largest army of a 50-year civil war advanced toward a shallow river in southern Korea. Its most dangerous weapon was not a blade. It was an old man on a horse riding beside the king, nearly 70. A guest in this army. Across the river stood the kingdom he himself had founded, the army he had built and led for a generation, commanding it, his own son. What breaks a man that way? To answer, we have to break a country first. Last episode ended with two lights on the map. In the north, Balhae, the kingdom that came back, burning bright. In the south, Silla, flickering. This is the story of the southern light going out and of what was built in the dark. One question runs through it. When a kingdom dies, what actually survives it? Hold on to this episode's answer. It is a name you already know. Why was Silla dying? Not invasion. There was none. The rot was structural. Silla ranked every life by blood, the bone rank system, and reserved the throne for a thin caste called the true bone. When a succession failed, the crown went to whichever noble faction fielded the most swords. From 780 on, that happened again and again. Some 20 kings in about a century and a half, many crowned or removed by coup. The center was consuming itself. Then the countryside stopped paying for it. Drought in 888. By 889, the state storehouses stood empty. So the court sent agents into a starving countryside to force the taxes out. It got rebellion instead. That year at Gyeongju, modern Gyeongju, two men named Wang Geon and Ano raised the first great revolt, and the army sent to crush them failed even to give battle effectively. Everyone understood at once, the capital no longer controlled its own provinces. The collapse fed itself. In 894, the scholar Cho Chi-won offered the court 10 reforms that might have slowed it. The court could not or would not act. By 896, a bandit host called the Red Trousers raided to the edge of the capital itself. In 897, the queen, Jin-sung, abdicated, worn down. Real power now sat with the Hojok, castle lords with their own walls, their own taxes, their own private armies. Silla had not been conquered. It had dissolved. The first man to build a kingdom from the pieces was a soldier. Gyeon Hwon, a peasant's son who had joined Silla's army and earned junior rank on the southwest coast. When the center failed, he turned his troops from defense to conquest. He held Gyeongju by 892. The chronicle claims 5,000 men rallied to him within a month, and in 900 at Gyeongju he went beyond rebellion. He proclaimed a kingdom, later Baekje, and he vowed to avenge King Weija, the last king of Baekje, destroyed 240 years before. He had not just raised an army, he had raised the dead. A year later, in the center north, it happened again. Gung Yi, a one-eyed former monk. Tradition claims a Silla king's discarded son, though no one can verify it, had risen through the rebel armies until he beat his own overlord. In 901 he proclaimed a kingdom and reached for a greater ghost. He named it Goryeo, later Goryeo. The northern kingdom destroyed in 668, reborn as a banner. Remember episode 7. Balhae's kings signed their letters King of Goryeo. Now a southern warlord claimed the same dead name. The peninsula was speaking in resurrected names. Look at the map in 901 and read the irony. Later Baekje in the southwest. Later Goryeo across the center and north. The largest of the three, and Silla, which once held it all, shrunk to the southeast. 2.5 centuries after unification, the three kingdoms were back. Same names, new men. Episode 6 asked whether Silla ever truly unified Korea. This map is the era's own answer. Inside that northern kingdom rose this story's third founder, Wang Geon of Songguk, today's Kaesong. Born not to aristocrats but to sea merchants, a family that ran ships and trade along the west coast, his clan submitted to Gung Yi in 896, and the son became the warlord's finest commander. In 903 he sailed a fleet south and seized Naju, a port deep in later Baekje's rear, a knife at Gyeon Hwon's back for the next 30 years. By 913 he was prime minister of the realm. Then the king he served began to change. Gung Yi renamed his kingdom twice. He proclaimed himself the Maitreya, the Buddha of the future, in a golden crown, and he claimed a power called Gyeongsun, reading minds to find the treason hidden in them. Officials died of that power. Monks died. In 915, the record says, his own queen and sons. In fairness, nearly everything we know of Gung Yi was written under the dynasty that replaced him, and historians suspect the madness was exaggerated. But his own generals believed enough of it. In one famous anecdote, Wang Geon survived a mind-reading accusation only by falsely confessing on the spot. The next accusation might not miss. In the 6th month of 918, 4 senior generals decided the kingdom needed a different king, and chose Wang Geon. He refused. The record says they persuaded him. The palace changed hands in a night. Gyeongju fled in disguise, and was dead within days, killed, the sources tell it in differing ways, by common people as he ran. Then the new king made the decision that outweighs every battle in this episode. He kept the dead kingdom's name. His state would be Goryeo. Hold that word. It has a very long way to travel. 3 states now shared the broken peninsula, and ancient Silla, a court without a country, leaned openly toward Goryeo. To Gyeon Hwon, the era's most feared soldier, that lean was intolerable. So in 927 he did what no enemy had done in Silla's nearly 1,000 years. He marched on the capital itself. In the traditional account, King Jongai was feasting at a pleasure pavilion as the enemy entered Gyeongju. Gyeon Hwon forced him to take his own life, stripped the palaces of a millennium, and installed a king of his own choosing, a royal kinsman named Kim Bu, intended as a puppet. Then he turned for home. The news raced ahead of him. So did an army, Goryeo's, driving south to cut him off. At a mountain called Gongsan, near modern Daegu, Gyeon Hwon was waiting for it. The ambush annihilated Goryeo's cavalry, and Wang Geon was cornered, minutes from death or capture. By tradition, his general Sin Sung-gyeom, one of the 4 men who had crowned him, put on the king's own armor and rode out as the king, drawing the enemy onto himself. He died in Wang Geon's place. The general Kim Nak fell beside him. The real king slipped away in disguise. 9 years on a throne, and Wang Geon had just lost everything but his life. And yet 927 is the year Gyeon Hwon began to lose. Killing an anointed king in his own capital did not frighten the peninsula into line. It appalled it. Silla's new puppet king leaned toward Goryeo anyway, harder than his predecessor ever had. The castle lords watched and began choosing sides. Gyeon Hwon had won the field. He was losing the country. The proof came in 930 at Gochang, modern Andong, where Goryeo, fighting beside the local clans, broke later Baekje's field army, 8,000 dead by the chronicles' count. By tradition, 110 fortresses across 30 districts submitted in the aftermath. The tide turned and never turned back. Then Wang Geon showed what he had learned. The next year he entered Gyeongju, small escort, as a guest, and treated the broken old court with elaborate courtesy. 4 years after the sack, the message was pointed. There is another way to be absorbed. Momentum became gravity. In 932, the Chinese court of later Tang formally recognized Wang Geon, the era's diplomatic seal, and only that. In 934, Goryeo won again at Unju, and from the north came exiles. In the winter of 926, the Khitan had extinguished Balhae. Last episode's promised winter. Its full story waits for another day. Around 934, the sources disagree on the year. Balhae's crown prince, Gyeong Hwon, led tens of thousands of refugees into Goryeo. Wang Geon gave him the royal surname, and reportedly called Balhae a relative country. The 2 heirs of Goryeo back under one roof. Later Baekje still fielded the strongest army on the peninsula. It was never beaten from the front. Gyeon Hwon had more than 10 sons, and favored a younger one, Gyeongju, as his heir. In the spring of 935 his eldest son Sin Sung-gyeom answered with 2 of his brothers. They killed Gyeongju. They took the throne, and they locked their father, the founder, the most feared soldier of the age, inside a temple called Gyeongsan. 3 months later, the old man escaped. By tradition, his guards were plied with drink, and fled to the one place his son's men could not follow, Naju, Goryeo's port behind Baekje lines. The same port Wang Geon had seized 30 years before. The knife at his back had become his door out, and there Gyeon Hwon did the unthinkable. He surrendered to the enemy of his life. Wang Geon sent ships for him, received him with ceremony, and honored the elder man with the title Songbo, Father Elder. Now you know who the old man at the river is. What remains is why he rides. Watching from Gyeongju was the puppet who would not stay one, King Gongsan, ruling by 935 little more than a single city. That winter he gathered his court and said, in the sense the sources preserve, the land on every side belongs to others. We are weak, alone, and cannot defend ourselves. He chose to hand his kingdom to Goryeo, whole, unburned, voluntarily. His own crown prince opposed it bitterly. Tradition says the prince walked into the mountains and lived out his days in hemp clothes, mourning a kingdom. The king overruled his son and rode north. The sources describe the procession, carts and treasure stretching for miles, and then the terms, which are Wang Geon's whole method in miniature. Gongsan received the highest rank in Goryeo, seated above Wang Geon's own crown prince. His capital, renamed Gyeongju, came back to him as his own fief. Wang Geon's eldest daughter became his wife, and through another marriage, Silla royal blood entered the Goryeo line itself. By the traditional count, a dynasty of 992 years ended in a signed handover, not a fire. And every holdout on the peninsula could now read the price list. Surrender to Goryeo paid in honor. One kingdom left. In the 9th month of 936, Wang Geon marched south, 87,500 men by the Goryeos' count, around 100,000 by the Samguk-uses. The chronicles disagree and both are their numbers, not an audit. We are back at the river, Illi-cheon, near modern Gumi, and now you know the weapon. Gyeon Hwon rode in the Goryeo line, in full view of the army he had founded. Baekje commanders began coming over before the fighting started. When it started, the army disintegrated. Sin Sung-gyeom surrendered. The later three kingdoms were over, ended at the last, not by force alone, but by a father's face. Gyeon Hwon outlived his kingdom by days. He died at Gongsan. The sources record an ulcer. Tradition adds grief and rage that his usurping son had been spared. Count the endings this war handed out. Gyeongju, a tyrant's death in flight. Silla, a signature and an honored old age. Gyeon Hwon, a front row seat at the funeral of everything he built. And Wang Geon, a country he now had to hold. He bound the castle lords to the throne by marriage, 29 wives from clans across the realm, a web of in-laws that held the country together, and would convulse the succession the moment he died. That story is coming. He rebuilt ruined Pyongyang, Goryeo old capital, as his western capital, and pushed his frontier back toward the old northern lands. In the mainstream assessment, this was a fuller unification than 668. Old Silla, Old Baekje, the Taebong center, and a Goryeo descended elite from fallen Balhae. One Crown, Episode 6, left a question open. Did Silla truly unify Korea? Some historians answered. The first full unification came later. It has a date. And at the river, every army on that field fought under a resurrected name. Baekje, Goryeo, Silla. And one name outlived the war. Goryeo held the peninsula for nearly 5 centuries, and in its ports, a merchant family's ports, foreign traders learned what this country was called and carried the word west. The world has never stopped saying it. Goryeo, Korea. The chain we have followed since episode 5 is complete. Wang Geon died in 943. The year before, the Khitan, destroyers of Balhae, had sent him a gift of 50 camels. He exiled the envoys and let the camels starve beneath a bridge. An answer, not a negotiation. And the empire took note. Next time, the founder's sons tear at his throne and the empire comes to the door. This was episode 8 of Untold Korea. Subscribe.